He laughed first. That's what caught everyone off guard when the Dina envelope hit the table. Jovi, still in full performance mode, cracking a quick line like it was another over-edited drama prop. And then Yara didn't laugh with him. Hey, this is Oliva, and you're watching 90 Day Scoop US. If you've ever watched someone smile through panic, and a partner sit there stone faced with something bigger than anger brewing underneath, buckle up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments, when did you notice the shift? Because when Yara's pregnancy was confirmed, fans expected tears, hugs, maybe that signature reality TV fake joy for the cameras. Instead, she looked dead into the floor, not crushed, not scared, cold. And the moment was haunting. Now rewind 2 months. Long before the envelope, long before the second baby rumors, something off was already bleeding through screen time. Viewers couldn't name it at first. Jovi was doing his usual, hands in pockets, one-liners firing off like confetti, making light of things he barely listened to. And Yara? Scrolling her phone. Not mad, checked out, like she wasn't even in the same scene. For a minute, people chalked it up to usual couple friction, exhaustion. Maybe the cameras caught them on an off day. Until the episodes kept stacking, and her distance stayed identical. So what slipped under the radar? It wasn't a fight. There was no dramatic wardrobe toss or walkout. The breakdown wasn't loud. It was invisible. The kind that creeps in quietly when you start counting how many dinners you've eaten alone, how many nights your partner's on a flight, or offshore, or looping that same joke again while you stare blankly through him. She didn't get louder. She got still. Jovi's jokes, the charm fans once quoted, started missing their mark once you realized Yara was done reacting. And not in a petty silent treatment way. This was a different stillness, tense, deliberate. The kind of quiet that buries what someone's already decided off camera. She'd smile through group scenes, answer questions without detail, and the silence crawling underneath it all started feeling heavier than anything the show let her say directly. There's a moment people rewatched a dozen times. It's subtle. He makes a lazy joke about maybe this baby will finally make her want to stay in America, and she blinks once, slow, then doesn't move. That's something you only catch if you've sat across from someone who's planning an exit. Her silence in that shot hit harder than any clapback could. And when the producers finally hinted a Dina test had been requested, the fandom snapped to attention. Not because of what was said, but because of what hadn't been. The way she sipped her water mechanically. The way she crossed her arms like she was bracing for an impact that wasn't emotional, but logistical. This wasn't panic. This was preparation. What's telling is her body language when the actual envelope got pulled. She didn't flinch when the name was mentioned. She flinched before. When the host touched the drawer. A reflex. Like, her body had already rehearsed this moment 100 times alone and was waiting for the truth to finally catch up with the lie everyone else was still believing. Why would someone react like that before anything's even said? That's what we need to watch next. It didn't start with a fight. It started with absence. Not the kind that shows up in bold letters or emergency texts. This was the quiet, steady kind, routine missed calls, weekends passed in different time zones, conversations that ended before they even began. She stopped asking when he'd be home. He stopped noticing. And that was the real shift. In earlier seasons, even in their messiest moments, Yara's presence came with fire. Whether you agreed with her or not, she engaged. But something shifted this time. Group scenes? She was there, physically, but always placed just slightly outside the center. Watch her expressions, blank when others laughed, controlled when Jovi reached out, and always watching the exits more than the people. Meanwhile, Jovi played DJ for his greatest hits. Make a joke, grab a drink, change the subject. Same rhythm, different reasons. But the punchlines weren't landing anymore. Yara didn't spar back. She didn't snap. She didn't correct him. She disconnected. Viewers picked it up immediately after the pregnancy news dropped. Instead of the usual joy-filled tears or dramatic sobbing finales we've all gotten used to in this franchise, Yara confirmed her pregnancy like she was reading a weather forecast. No over-the-top buildup, no baby reveal energy. Just a sentence. Final, clinical, and stone cold. And that's when the internet exploded. Not over the pregnancy itself, but over what it didn't come with. Her posture, the flat tone in her voice, Jovi's overcompensating grin trying to inject false excitement into a scene that clearly didn't want it. One fan posted, "Why does this pregnancy feel like a funeral?" Thousands agreed. Then came the moment that truly cracked everything open. Remember the episode when drinks were offered and Yara quietly declined, eyes avoiding both the server and the camera? Up until then, this would have seemed normal. But this time, her refusal came without her usual sarcasm or quip about calories or headaches. No laugh, no banter, just a quiet no, "I'm good." Still as ice, like every movement she made was now intentional, measured, held together. And Jovi? Oblivious. Or maybe not oblivious, just invested in staying on script. He made another joke, of course. Called her a buzzkill, laughed way too loud. Not for her, but for himself. For the cameras. For the storyline he thought they were still playing. But something about her expression made fans hit rewind. The camera panned just slow enough to catch her looking out of frame. Not at any person, but at space. Disconnected. The emotional intimacy once holding that relationship together had hollowed out. And when a relationship hollows out quietly, all that remains is performance. Jovi kept telling his version. She stopped writing hers. People online started digging. Someone on Reddit reposted an old blog comment about a trip Yara took back to Europe. The timelines weren't lining up. She'd stayed longer than expected. Jovi had been somewhere offshore. And that gap started spreading. Like a thin crack in glass, suddenly spiderwebbing across the entire pane. It wasn't just in the editing. Now fans were scanning outfits, scenes, timestamps, background reflections. People pulled archives of old Instagram stories and started lining them up against what the episodes were showing. And that's when it happened. Someone zoomed into a photo and saw it. Not a face, not a message, a watch. Same sleeve, same wrist, same watch. In 2 cities, weeks apart. And suddenly, the question stopped being, is there emotional distance between them? Now it was, who was close to her when Jovi wasn't? When Yara said she needed time in Europe, nobody blinked. A little space, a reset with her mom, a chance to ground herself back home after everything they'd been through. It made sense. But it's what happened during that trip that turned out to be the real script behind the scenes. Not because of what she said, but what she didn't explain. The edits never followed her past the airport. The narrative was officially Yara's in Ukraine with family. But unofficially, the timeline wasn't lining up. Fans noticed first through side-by-side scene comparisons. One sharp-eyed viewer compared Jovi's offshore work rotation with her extended stay overseas, and something didn't sit right. The dates didn't overlap like they should have if it were just a visit. Jovi had been back in the States for 2 full weeks before Yara flew home, even though she said her return was based around his schedule. No mention. No reunion posts, no egg stories, nothing connecting those 2 moments. A blackout zone in their shared timeline. Then the screenshots started spreading. Photos of Yara in cafes, markets, hotel lobbies, always casual, but never alone. And the person in the background? Carefully turned, always slightly obstructed, casually stepping out of frame. But too many pictures started to match. Same build, same colors, same angles, like someone always standing just outside the edge of her comfort zone, but close enough to leave a shadow. And then came that image. The one fans froze, zoomed in, reversed, adjusted lighting on. The jacket sleeve, beige with black lining. But not just once. 3 different photos. Same shape, same roll in the cuff. And the watch. Gold bezel, leather strap, flat-faced, slightly scratched. Identical in detail and always on the same wrist across different locations. People weren't reaching. They were stacking real evidence. What started as speculation turned into organized receipts. Entire Google folders, Reddit threads, Discord servers dedicated to lining up her Europe trip against the show's internal timeline. And suddenly, the questions got sharper. Was this a secret? Or was it something Jovi already knew and refused to see? Because while the internet hunted for clues, Jovi leaned harder into the performance. Posting throwback couple pics, joking on camera about baby names, mocking fans calling the pregnancy suspicious. But his laughs were mismatched. Almost louder than needed, like someone talking over their own fear. That's where the viewer split began. Some said he was totally blindsided, that he was being humiliated on national TV. But others saw something darker, a man in denial. A partner so used to brushing things off with charm and tequila that he refused to look too closely, even when the answers were sitting inches from his face. Both takes held weight. Meanwhile, the edits got weirder. The show, usually an expert at slow pans and awkward silences, started chopping mid-conversation. Scene jumps mid-reaction. Key details abruptly cut. One moment Yara's discussing her trip. The next, we're at brunch with other couples. No bridge, no resolution, just gaps. And those gaps said something without a word. Then came backstage. A producer casually mentioned a clip that didn't make it into the edit, and Yara froze. Just for a beat. A half-second flicker in her eye. Jovi, of course, laughed it off again. But what if it wasn't missing? What if that clip wasn't cut because it didn't fit the story, but because it changed the story completely? Cheating makes headlines. But this? This wasn't some tabloid affair. This was years of emotional starvation passed off as just how life is. It wasn't about who texted who. It was about who stopped showing up long before anyone else entered the picture. And for Yara, that absence became something she stopped explaining, because she'd already said it all 100 times while no one listened. Jovi always framed it as duty. Offshore work, long stretches on the job, FaceTime when possible, credit cards left behind with enough digits to cover distance. On paper, he was providing. So when she started pulling away, he saw it as ungratefulness, not exhaustion. But the real decay didn't start in Europe. It started in hotel rooms, cold kitchens, new cities where she parented alone while he cracked jokes for the crew. She moved continents for him, but the support system she needed never followed. Family? Thousands of miles away. Language? Still heavy on her tongue. Marriage? Built on check-ins and apologies that came a week late every time. And when she needed comfort, she got distractions. A trip, a gift, maybe a promise to do better after this next rotation. Rinse, repeat. Survival doesn't always look dramatic. It just starts with someone realizing no one's coming to fix it. Fans often mistake stillness for strength. When Yara stopped crying on camera, some thought she'd grown cold. But emotional detachment isn't always a wall. It's insulation. She wasn't lashing out because her energy shifted from reaction to preparation. Walking through every day like you're carrying something soaked in silence takes stamina. Her tone changed. Her presence on screen felt faded, like she was living in parallel with her own life, quietly planning her next move while pretending the current one was still worth it. Meanwhile, Jovi kept smiling for group shots, drinking in confessionals, dropping one-liners about baby #2 fixing things. As if this was a narrative bump in their storyline, not the result of years of delayed closeness. He confused attention with affection, time spent physically near her as emotional investment. But close isn't always connected. And distraction masquerading as stability doesn't fool someone who's already been surviving alone for long enough. The loneliness was subtle, but it was consistent. No birthday surprises, no tight scenes as a couple, no real-less moments left. Fans only noticed in hindsight once the damage caught up on screen. And by then, her silence wasn't a cry for attention. It was peace in plain sight. And here's what most missed until the tape rolled. Yara requested the DNA test on her own. Not during filming. Not in front of Jovi. Quietly. Months ago. Alone. And production kept it under wraps. Not for drama timing, but probably because her request wasn't made to spark scandal. It was made to get clarity. And Jovi? He didn't know. Not even a hint until the envelope was placed in front of him during filming. So now the question isn't, how could she keep that from him? It's, why did she reach a place where she had to? The tell-all wasn't live, but it might as well have been. Every breath felt audible. Every silence held weight. And when the host pulled out that sealed envelope, the entire cast stiffened. All eyes locked on the paper. Except Yara's. She was already looking away, as if the contents were old news to her. Not shocking. Not dramatic. Just delayed truth catching up on camera. Jovi smirked. Tried to soften the tension with a classic fallback. Watch it say the baby's not mine. Imagine? Light laugh. Fake bravado, but no smile from her. Not even a glance. Her hands were rigid on her lap. Her breath shallow, but steady. That 1 second blew his performance wide open, because everyone watching could see that she wasn't imagining anything. She was bracing. His eyes only started searching hers after the audience laughed nervously, looking for that familiar cue, her rolling her eyes, maybe a sarcastic jab back. Nothing. She stayed still. Too still. And Jovi started realizing something wasn't right. His posture changed. He leaned slightly forward, the tension in his shoulders betraying a truth he hadn't let himself consider before. She wasn't scared. She wasn't anxious. She was certain. When the paper was read, the words felt heavier than scripted lines. Simple. Clean. Final. The child is not biologically Jovi's. That sentence didn't hit like an explosion. It was worse. It echoed. The split happened instantly, but there was no shouting. His face fell fast, violently, quick, from smugness to silence. His hands clenched, his lips parted, like he was about to say something but found nothing. Across the room, someone gasped. Someone else whispered what? Like maybe they misheard. But Yara didn't move. She didn't break. No tears, no groveling, no defensive outburst. Her calm was sharper than any meltdown. She didn't look proud. She looked tired. Not of the moment, but of the years that led to it. The silence settled around her like armor. Jovi begged the host to confirm. Was this a real test? When was it requested? Why didn't he know? His voice cracked under the pressure of needing someone, anyone, to tell him this wasn't real. But nobody could do that, because all of it was real. It had been real for much longer than anyone on that stage realized. Another cast member mumbled Jovi's name, trying to pull him back down from the spiral. He stood up, sat down again, then stood halfway, like his body couldn't settle. He turned to Yara and finally said something. Not loud, not angry, just raw. You did this without me? And she finally looked at him. It was the first real eye contact they'd had in the entire taping. Yes, she said. Steady. Almost soft. Because I needed to know. The room froze. No one moved. He blinked hard, like trying to reframe this as betrayal. But that's not what he was looking at. This wasn't revenge. There was no emotion left behind her words. Only the clarity of a decision she'd already made. Most people in that position would have erupted. But Yara didn't need to. Because this wasn't anger. This was exit. People expected a blow-up. Screaming, name-calling, maybe Yara storming off and Jovi chasing after her with a camera 2 steps behind. But the chaos never came. And that silence hit harder than any explosion could. Because she didn't defend. She didn't explain. And above all, she didn't apologize. She sat there like someone who'd already lived through the ending, and now everyone else was catching up. Jovi kept fumbling for a moment that might reset the narrative, still pushing out phrases like, "You should have told me, and we could have worked through it." But each sentence landed too late. Because the heartbreak wasn't fresh for her. What looked like betrayal to him may have felt like closure to her. She finally spoke, and the voice didn't shake. "You were gone more than you were here. I stopped trying to ask for anything. That was it. No raised voice, no dramatics." She said it clean, like someone who spent years waiting to be heard and had now stopped hoping. What's wild is how many fans rushed to the comments trying to choose between her or him, trying to crown a villain. Some viewers called it cold, said she should have left clean, or fought harder, or never gone behind his back. Others paused, looked at the months of footage again, and saw something different. A woman who reached her limit, slowly, quietly, anonymously, while still posting like everything was fine. Because when you're holding it together for a child, for a storyline, for the illusion of peace, breakdown doesn't look dramatic. It looks like detachment. Think back. The absence from social media. The solo walks in Europe. The way she dodged affection, not out of malice, but out of depletion. Her face didn't scream anger. It whispered survival. When people rewatched those episodes, it wasn't about pointing fingers anymore. It was about seeing what loneliness looks like before it explodes. Jovi scrambled to keep up, suddenly pushing sentences he'd never said before. "I can be more present. We can figure it out. I'll change." But change offered at the edge of consequence doesn't sound like growth. It sounds like panic. The interpretations flooded in. One side focused on the cheating, a clear betrayal. Game over. The other side zeroed in on the erosion. That long staircase of nights Yara spent alone. Birthday mornings half-texted. Calls dropped mid-conversation. And the emotional ceiling she'd lived under while Jovi partied like everything was still fixable with a vacation or a joke. But the real story wasn't about cheating versus loyalty. The real story was about connection slowly dying in public, while both people pretended it wasn't happening. And pretending takes energy. She ran out first. Europe wasn't a getaway. It was a first draft. A test run. A quiet window into the future she was trying to imagine. A version of life where she didn't have to negotiate for peace. Where structure could replace uncertainty. Where stillness didn't come from exhaustion, but choice. And if anyone thought her going overseas was temporary, they weren't reading between the edits. Because she wasn't vacationing, she was practicing. Jovi was still talking when the goodbye had already taken place, pleading not with anger, but with desperation. The kind that sounds less like "I love you" and more like "don't leave me like this." Every sentence carried a last-minute urgency. "Let's fix this. I'll follow you anywhere. We can go to therapy. We can start over." But beneath it all, something was slipping, and even he could feel it. The story he thought he was still writing had ended weeks ago. He was standing on a page that no longer existed. Yara didn't scream. She didn't throw memories in his face or weaponize old texts. Her voice stayed level, and that's what made it all so haunting. She wasn't negotiating. She was done spending her voice on reasons that would only be heard when they became threats. Her clarity wasn't cruel. It was necessary. "I want peace," she said flatly. "You always offer improvement, but I need stability." It was the most honest sentence of the entire season. There wasn't a big exit scene. She didn't slam the door. She folded clothes, zipped bags, arranged documents. A quiet act of self-preservation. The details were what told the truth. No pausing to cry on the edge of the bed. No second-guessing a ticket. Her moves weren't impulsive. They were evidence of long planning. This goodbye didn't start when the camera crew showed up. It started years ago, with every birthday he missed. Every night, she fell asleep next to an empty charger instead of a goodnight call. Jovi stood in the hallway as she packed. His face looked confused, not by the reality of her decision, but by how real it looked. He kept repeating that he never expected her to really leave, that she always threatened but stayed, that love was supposed to overcome pressure. But what he never understood was that she hadn't been threatening. She had been hoping. And now, she was simply done. The internet reacted with its usual split. Some slammed her for staying too long, for leaving too quietly, for not making the divorce more transparent. The rest finally saw what she'd been showing for months. This was not an impulsive betrayal. It was the clearest illustration of what happens when someone begs to matter and eventually stops asking. Not because they don't care anymore, but because asking becomes embarrassing. Jovi's lifestyle wasn't the villain. It was the training ground for how to lose someone while telling himself he did everything right. He gave her trips, lists of things to buy, and jokes to fill silences. But intimacy isn't purchased. It's built. And every time he chose comfort over connection, ease over effort, he wasn't avoiding conflict. He was building her timeline to leave. When the final bags were zipped, she didn't cry, and that absence of emotion told truths louder than any breakdown could have. She did not cheat in spite of loving him. She left because she loved alone for too long. And when love becomes a solo habit you're performing out of routine, it doesn't just dissolve. It collapses inward. Quiet. Heavy. Inevitable. Jovi sat in silence for the first time without jokes to save him. No cameras to charm. No producers guiding him into a redemption arc. No energy left to spin the story his way. He stayed in that green room, holding a phone he didn't scroll. Unread messages lighting up like reminders of everything he missed in real time. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just still. Yara didn't post a goodbye. She didn't stage a final moment. She boarded a plane with the same calm she'd carried into the last fight, the last conversation, the last moment of pretending things were okay. For her, this wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. Quiet wasn't a tactic. It was a boundary. And this time, she kept it. Because silence like that doesn't come from rage. It comes from exhaustion that finally turned into acceptance. There was no televised win, no sudden reappearance in his arms, no baby update to glue the pieces back together. Some stories aren't meant to be fixed on screen, and some breaks don't need blame to make sense. They just need to be seen clearly, without excuses. Being around isn't the same as being there. Emotional absence doesn't make less noise. It just hangs around longer before anyone admits what it cost. And this one cost them everything. But while everyone was breaking down Jovi and Yara, there was another tell-all couple falling apart just off camera. And fans caught a quiet blink and you'll miss it moment that might have exposed them next. You won't believe how subtle it was. Watch this.